All right, welcome everyone to Take Human Action PA, episode 43. I'm Calvin, and I'm your host, and we've got Autumn returning to the show. How are you doing, Autumn?
I'm doing great, Calvin. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about the Take Human Action Tour, and especially because anybody who's watching, you can still get to a lot more. We just attended the first of, is it 6 stops I think they're making?
It's 6 total, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll be having someone on who can tell us a lot more about that in a minute. But yeah, just to say what we're going to talk about tonight, real quick. We just went to the first of, like Autumn said, of the Take Human Action Tour events. This one was in New York City. Just coincidentally happened to be the first one. So it was a great turnout. We're going to go through some of the highlights or takeaways from some of the speakers that we had. And the campaign training on the next day was very valuable as well. So we'll be talking about that tonight with a returning guest to the show, our favorite doctor, Dr. Irene Mavrakakis. How are you doing, Irene?
Hi guys. Hi Calvin. Hi Autumn. Thanks for having me on.
Good to see you again. And good to
Yeah.
see you at the event last weekend. And now we have on for the first time a longtime friend of ours and first time on this show. He's co-founder and board member of the Mises Caucus. Let's welcome Luke Ensor. How are you doing, Luke?
A little nervous, but thanks for having me.
I know it's not your first rodeo. I've seen you on a show before, at least once. Well, regardless, we're glad to have you on. So
thanks for having me.
Here, I'll drink to Luke's first time on this podcast. I actually didn't realize that.
Yeah, there you go. Cheers. Yeah, we've had Mike on a couple times, but not Luke yet. I guess we got to wrangle Jeff at some point. Yeah, he's the next person we'll have to lasso in.
Well, he's going to be busy, actually. He's emceeing at least a few of the upcoming.
Yeah, possibly 2 of them.
Yeah.
I don't remember, but we'll get into all that. So I have to give some credit to Autumn, who definitely took the most detailed notes, I think, of anyone there. So that allows us to go through everyone and talk about all the points that they highlighted with a good degree of detail, at least enough to give everyone an idea of like what they talked about. So why don't you kick us off?
But not too much. We don't want to spoil it because some of these speakers are going to speak again, and there might not be too many crazy things happening between now and their next speech. We don't want to give away all the high points.
Yeah, that's true. We don't want to give away all of it. It's definitely different to see it in person than it is to watch the videos after the fact. Now, I know I will have to watch all the remaining tour events on video, unfortunately, for me anyway. But if you all are in the area of one of the future tour events, you should definitely go out. It was a great time. One of the few instances that I've seen Dave Smith and Tom Woods in the same place like that. I feel like that hardly ever happens. I can't be wrong about that. It just doesn't happen very often. So even just the 2 of them alone, it's a powerhouse right there.
Yeah, gosh. Was the last time they were together, was that the 2022 Pennsylvania convention, perhaps?
I thought it was Reno.
Sure. Oh, sure. Yeah, they were both at Reno. Right.
Yeah. But that might be it for the past year or so. Yeah, but any comments, Luke or Irene, before we start?
I had a good time, and New York City is as, say, expensive as I feared. It's also a lot smaller than I thought. The city itself is pretty large, but everything in it is a lot smaller than it is. But this was the first of, like Autumn said, 6 events, and the next 5 are coming up, and hope to see everyone there.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I had a great time both on Saturday and Sunday. New York City is home to me, so it was a lot of fun for me to go back home and experience this event. And at the end, which I know they had all of the speakers, and it was Maj and Tom Woods and Dave Smith, and they were answering questions together, and Maj was videotaping the other speakers, and it was just a really amazing experience. So I just needed to say that up front.
Yeah. And one thing I don't want to leave out is on social media, Tom Woods and Keith Knight took a picture by Rothbard's old apartment building. So I was able to track down exactly where that was, because they might have given an address, but they said it so quickly, it just wasn't able to write it down. But I looked at the picture, I saw one of the street names, and I just looked at it. I was like, okay, it's probably on here, these two streets. So one day, when I think it was on Sunday, when
It was Sunday,
Luke and I were walking, when Luke and I were walking over
after we checked out
back to the venue for the training, we walked right by it and we made sure to get a picture in the exact same spot that Tom and Keith did. So now we have that.
A passerby offered to take a picture, and fortunately, they were not someone who ran off with the camera phone. So that was a double bonus.
Yeah,
I
was a little worried, but
running.
She seemed like a nice lady, so why not?
Yeah. Fortunately, we didn't have to go sprinting after her.
Us New Yorkers are actually really nice. Don't worry.
Yeah, I didn't even know until on the way back Irene actually grew up in New York.
Yeah, it's. I lived in Manhattan for 4 years and was born at Lenox Hill. Went to NYU, trained at St. Vincent's. Yeah, it was great. And that venue was an old Republican headquarters. It just the amount of.
Oh, you mean the Blockchain Center?
Yeah, the Blockchain Center used to be an old Republican headquarters, so I just kept envisioning all the smoke-filled backroom corrupt deals that went on. I'm just kidding. No, not really.
Yeah, replace the smoke with invisible blockchain streams.
Yeah, it was great.
And, well, not all the smoke, probably also vape.
Swap it out for pot and mushrooms, right? I got it.
All right. Well, we should probably get into it. So, Autumn, why don't you tell us about the first speaker?
Yeah, Del Woolridge was who we kicked off with, right? And
Yep.
Were any of you familiar with him? Because I was not.
No, I was not.
And that seems to be the consensus, is that he wasn't really well known to any of us, which it makes sense. I mean, it's so smart to start an event like this off that way, because people are naturally going to be running late in arriving. But I am really glad that I was there in time to see him, because he had so much fascinating stuff. Like he obviously was very heavily involved in the civil rights movement in the 60s, right? And he talked a lot about the real story behind, oh my gosh, well, it's only my first glass of wine. Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks' name was escaping me for a moment. So he talked a lot about some of the backstory behind Rosa Parks. Now, I used to be an avid NPR listener, and I had heard several stories covering that time and that specific event. And she asked if I'm okay.
Yeah.
The story arc of the direction that NPR has taken is very interesting. But I learned a lot while I listened anyway. But so the thing that he shared that I found really impactful about the Rosa Parks story was the detail with which, and I mean, I hope what he said was true, the detail with which he conveyed how she handled the situation. And I didn't understand that the Negro section of the bus was a moving target based on how full the bus was, right? So that was something new that he shared with us. And then that when the bus got full and the sit beyond this point got slid back is when she was asked to move. And she said, no, I'm not going to. And this is the interesting part now. The next part is what really got me. Because he was, he's focusing on civil disobedience. He said, you couldn't get more civil than this. The bus driver said, I'm going to have to call the police if you won't move. And do you remember what she said back? Anybody? You may do that. She said, you may do that. And she sat there politely. I thought that was so great.
You may do that.
Go ahead. Do what you must. And right? Because the point was, for it to come to a head like that. So that was what was necessary to call attention to the situation. And that ended up kind of being the focus of what I think he was conveying to us, the concept of causing disruption. Like causing disruption in a civilly disobedient manner, right? But I found him fascinating. I found his knowledge of history great. I gather that he also had like a slideshow presentation that he usually shares that we weren't displaying in that time. But he did a really good job of articulating what's able to share visually. I don't know if anybody else had any more of an impression.
No, just that when you said that, it made me think about the idea that if the whole world said no thank you to COVID mania, it would have never happened. No thank you.
Yeah, just
No
politely
test,
say
no
thank
mask.
you.
You know, it would have never happened, but we were infiltrated with fear, really, is what that was all about. And the NPR thing that you mentioned just reminded me of there's some controversy because they're offended that they were called state media the other day.
Yeah, Elon finally gave them the state media label, U.S. affiliated media.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she kind of represents the idea of take human action to an extent. You know, that one person standing up
You mean
can
Rosa?
Rosa, excuse me, can cause a profound change in the world, and we just need to remind ourselves of these things.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I believe it was from NPR actually that I learned this, she was not the first Black woman to resist and be arrested for doing so, specifically with regard to the seating on the buses. I'll never remember the name of the supposed first person, but she was a member of a political movement that set forth with a purpose of seizing and capitalizing on the opportunity, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it reminds me of back when COVID mania was happening. We actually did have someone that we all know who did something very much like that, and I don't know if he would have used those exact words, but probably said something similar, and that's Torin.
Did I ever tell you guys the time that I almost got arrested during COVID mania?
Do tell.
You have to tell now, even if you have told it before.
I don't think you've told me, no.
You have to tell it to TV land, Irene.
So the stage is that I knew from the beginning that masks didn't work, and had concerns about everything from the beginning. So this is May of 2020, and it was the day before my daughter's high school graduation. And I was really not wearing masks in most places, even though in Delaware most people were wearing masks. And I was trying to be kind and a Christian about it, but also trying to make some points. And that day I was actually in DMV, a music store, and a mattress store because I had just moved. And the other two stores are also interesting stories, but we'll stick to the second one. I had a profound success in motor vehicles, objecting to the mask wearing, and made friends with the cop who later came to a political event. But I'll tell that longer story another time when we have time. But then I went to this music store kind of emboldened with my kind of success at motor vehicles. And I was buying a guitar case for my daughter because I had gotten her a guitar for her high school graduation. And I had this typical answer. I'd walk in and it was a small store and he'd be like, you need to wear a mask. And I'd say, why? And he said, well, because of the mandate. I'm like, but why? It doesn't work. I really don't feel comfortable wearing a mask. It's not necessary. And, also, you try to be careful because you don't want to, it's not necessarily his fault that they've decided to accept, this is just a human being working at a store. So I really tried to find that balance to not cause human distress, right? These people are, willful participants in a fear-mongering situation where everybody's confused. And so I just kept resisting, and then he was texting his boss, and he said, "Ma'am, you really need to leave or wear the mask." And I'm like, "Well, I just want to buy this guitar case and then I'll go. Could you please let me just do this?" And he's like, "No, the owner is telling me to call the police."
Yeah.
And I was standing there and I'm like, well, I probably shouldn't get arrested. I don't know if I can get arrested, but I'm a physician in this town and tomorrow's my daughter's high school graduation. And she was already kind of upset with me with my standoffish behavior anyway. And, I tried to use some discernment and, how much of a line do I cross? And he got on the phone and started describing me on the phone. And there's this other guy just watching, middle-aged woman in curly hair. And I'm like, my senses came to me and I'm like, this is not the line in the sand that I'm going to stand for. There might be huge consequences and it's not going to serve any purpose. And so I laughed like Thelma and Louise. I just kind of left. And I needed to go buy a mattress. I didn't have a mattress. And I walked into this mattress store and the guy's like, "You need to wear a mask." And I'm like, "There's no one else here. I don't want to wear." I can't believe I actually said it because at this point I was kind of a little bit broken. And he just looked at me. He's like, "You're fine." I later became friends with him too. And you know how it goes with me. And then I kind of was shopping for mattresses and I was alone in this big mattress store in Slower Lower Delaware. And I laid down on the mattress and I just started crying. Really. I was just so done with the fact that as a physician, I knew that this was not rational behavior. And he just came and sat with me. And I've been back there many times and he remembers me and I tell him about Liberty Speaks and stuff. And I just said, "Thank you for processing the fact that I really just wasn't going to do it." And, he was just very kind. There was no one else in the store. He accepted, that, but yeah. So, how did we get to Irene telling the story of how she almost got arrested? But that's the story.
Relating to Rosa Parks, someone standing up and you mentioned that people had done that during COVID.
Yeah.
But circling back to Dale a little bit, his name was one that I was semi-familiar with because I'd encountered him on Facebook a little bit, but I wasn't too familiar with him, so I was not expecting him to be on the speaker list. But he's somewhat local to me. He lives in Lewisberry in York County, so it's not too far from Harrisburg where I'm at.
Yeah, I'll have to bring him out sometime.
I got him linked up with the York County chair down there. So,
awesome.
Jacob.
I like the idea we had a speaker who spoke about a different topic and someone that we can re-engage, someone that brings back to the collective memory, certain things in the past that we need to kind of pull out of the past and into our forefront of our understanding of how you fight for liberty and how you make change in this world. So I think it was just a valuable addition to the speaker list, and I think it's great that we're keeping communication with them.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, I would love to talk to him more if he comes out to some of our meetings. So I'll be looking forward to that. And just before we wrap up on that, I did mention Toure, and I didn't want to leave that without describing it. So I think we might have talked about it in one of our previous episodes with Toure. And so definitely go back and watch those for the full stories of his background. Is just he's a very fascinating person. But the short version is he went to, I believe it was Reading Terminal Market with a couple people, and that was when you had to have masks or cards or both. I don't remember which one now, but he went in and just sat down in the seats, and it was all like roped off except for like the one checkpoint, and they were checking cards and you weren't supposed to be in there. And he just went in and sat down anyway. I think what they just ultimately decided to leave him alone, but they were very much prepared to get arrested. They thought that's what was going to happen, but they just let them be. So in that sense, it was definitely a win.
Was this back when Torin was going by Audrey?
I don't remember the exact timeline, but I want to say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might have had a bit of a role in them not wanting the media
Possibly.
circus.
Possibly.
But it certainly worked out.
It would have made the headlines, that's for sure.
Yeah, so for anyone listening who's not familiar, let me just make the point. If you want to see who Calvin's talking about, obviously check the past episodes of our podcast here. But it's Toure and Danowski, and it's Don't Tread on Philly.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will go back and look and see what those episodes are. I'll say it in a minute. But in the meantime, Autumn, you want to do the intro for Keith Knight?
Yeah, Keith Knight. So I've been familiar with Keith through his appearances on several podcasts that I already follow, and I had no idea what he looked like. He's such a friendly character. I figured he was somebody with one of the LPPA affiliates that I just hadn't met yet. And then when he got up and started speaking, and I heard his voice, I'm like, oh, I know exactly who that is. This guy's a genius. And so in true Keith Knight fashion, he basically gave a rundown of modern American history and how America has gotten into a lot of wars and bing, bang, boom, summarizing all of the unintended consequences of each war, like that was totally counter to the objective of why we supposedly went at it in the first place. And really even several of them connecting the dots of how the people who were left in power is the reason why we ended up going to war the next time. And what else? I'm sorry. Should I just keep going? Because there was a big thing I learned from
Keith. Go ahead.
I've shared with people multiple times. And I think, so the thing I learned from Keith, I'll share in the context of this story where I have a job where I'm on the road a lot. And I have to fill out paperwork and submit reports. And I was stopped at a stop sign, really quick, making a note on my little clipboard. And I always look in my rearview mirror. Somebody stood up right behind me, and I didn't realize it. I was like, "Oh gosh, I'm sorry." I rolled my window down as he drove around to pass me, since I wasn't going. I'm in the country. There's nobody around usually. And I rolled my window down to apologize, and he instead says to me, "Hey, I want to thank you," because he read what I have stickers on my car. And it says, "Had enough yet? Vote Libertarian." It's a whole custom sticker I made with my Cricut. Anybody out there with a Cricut wants ideas, check with me. So he wanted to thank me because he goes, "I'm a registered Republican, but I'm really a Libertarian at heart, and I want to thank you for being out there representing." And I ended up getting out of my car. Like I said, it's the country. There's usually nobody around. So we just stood there for like 5 minutes, blocking both sides of the road, talking. And this is the story from Keith Knight that I shared. I had no idea what the real motivation was of the Pulse nightclub killer. The Pulse nightclub killer, for many of you listening who probably don't know, if you haven't heard somebody in our circles talk about this before, and I'm an avid consumer of podcasts, first time I've heard. He was actually motivated to demonstrate the pain that he was feeling and that many people that he was empathizing with were feeling as the result of American bombing of civilian targets in Syria. It's recorded on his 911 call with the hostage negotiator. And everyone under the sun, including, let's nail both sides of the table, Obama and Trump, gave public speeches publicly proclaiming how awful it was that the Pulse nightclub killer killed all these people under the sole motivation of hate for the LGBTQ community. A total freaking lie. He was actually set off by American war actions in Syria, and he wanted to make a political statement. And everybody acted to say anything except that. How wild is that?
That's a pretty common thing with most of these people who are spun up for FBI entrapment stings. Whenever they're trying to talk a target into, from what I understand, when they're trying to talk a target into carrying out some act of terror that they can then bust, and they're expressing hesitation, they don't talk about American culture or the Bill of Rights or any of the other neocons cited justifications for why they hate us for our freedoms.
Mhm.
What they do is they show videos of bombings in the Middle East. So that is typically what is used, and they're well aware of the effect that it has on people and why people do it as a response. And there's a good case to be made that they do it intentionally to get that, just so that you can keep creating enemies to keep justifying their own existence. Because of course, since the fall of the Soviet Union did, I forget who it was that was quoted in saying this, but we've done the worst thing to you that we could have. We have now denied you an enemy, and so they're now creating enemies all over. So, and yeah, Keith's. I didn't catch all of it, but Keith's speech certainly did go through how America uses and creates and spins up stories of foreign enemies, foreign boogeymen, in order to justify its continued existence and growth.
Well, yeah, and it's that classic war myth and misunderstanding propaganda interdispersed with the military-industrial complex and the agendas of politicians and the oligarchy that leads to this situation where we feel as tribalistic humans to decide who is us and who is them. And then that concept is propagated amongst the minds of all the people in the various nations in war, right? But it just keeps repeating itself over and over again.
It's not just repeating itself, it's repeated intentionally by powerful actors who want it to keep going.
Well, and history doesn't repeat itself. Human behavior repeats itself.
And it rhymes.
Humans have been killing each other since humans have existed. We're just finding really more horrible ways to do it over disagreements and ideas, and the things that we just mentioned, which is incredibly unfortunate.
There's a reason why we do what we do. It's because we know that there's a lot of evil in the world, and we're here to combat it.
So one of the other things that Keith talked about was the rhetoric that we cannot negotiate with Putin. There's no negotiating with Putin. And he drew some parallels with, like, why? Well, we could negotiate with Mao. There was a time when it was okay to like Maoist China is invoked when you want to talk about like the most horrific regimes in history, right? We could negotiate with Mao at one point, but not Putin.
Yeah, I don't think this was Mao, but ping pong diplomacy when Russia or the USSR at that point was, when we had bad relations with them, we just turned to China instead and made Russia look like an idiot because it didn't really matter if they were communist. It didn't stop us from trying to establish a trade relationship with them.
Right, and the reason why none of it makes sense is because all of this doesn't actually make real sense because of all the things that we know. How the military-industrial complex influences politicians and decision makers. And then we get into these same situations, and then the narrative is set, and then Americans happily participate in the divisive politics and pick the Democrat or Republican side, which both have become actually, which makes it easier for us as libertarians to really say neither one of these people want peace.
Right. Well, right. It's all about leveraging the two sides that keep us fighting with each other, which kind of goes back to the whole setup of the Pulse nightclub killer in the first place, right? Instead of revealing any of the information that pointed to the government's bad diplomacy and bad foreign policies that lead to these problems, they said, "Oh no, it's because he hates gay people." So we got to really call out and keep people thinking that there's a war on the LGBTQ community. so that you're heightening any sort of conflict that is naturally going to happen in a diverse society.
Right, and they use that language, the war language, to again use the divisive politics and the hot topics, which is one of them. But just as a physician, I would be remiss in bringing up the concepts behind these shootings that occur and what happens when we have shootings and the incorrect narrative that leads the focus to potential anti-gun legislation. And what we really need to talk about is the mental health crisis. But one thing we really, really need to look at is the data on the risk-benefit profile of a lot of the pharmaceuticals that are given to people who have mental health issues, and how insurances have cut useful things like cognitive behavioral therapy and the polypharmacy of various psychotropic medicines, for which the overwhelming percentage of them just have these black box warnings for suicidal and homicidal ideation. And in particular, if there's a change or an addition, have an added increased potential incidence of suicidal and homicidal ideation. And people turn a blind eye to this because, we don't want to feel uncomfortable about questioning the motivations or the potential medical causes of someone wanting to kill, either suicidal or homicidal. But until we have a truthful discussion about the problems with psychiatric care in the United States, and in particular, there's a lot of studies about the questionable usefulness of the degree of polypharmacy that's used, and the fact that treatments like cognitive behavioral treatment has been completely diminished. And the reasons for the mental health crisis is even more concerning. Of course, COVID mania tyranny led to a profound increase in this issue, which we'll see for decades and decades, which is not related to what happened in this case. But I just couldn't bring up these issues when you're talking about a shooting, because they are issues that we need to discuss and be honest with ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with having that conversation and turning a magnifying glass on medicine that has some concerns as to how it's practiced.
Yeah, and we'll definitely have to have you on for another episode, Irene, where we just talk about that's like what's wrong with modern medicine.
That's a whole other
Let me
topic.
let me add two things. A, I am by no means telling anybody to not take their psych meds. And B, nothing inherently on this podcast is intended to be medical advice, because I do not have a doctor-patient relationship. I'm just saying that we need to look at the standard of care for the multiple medications and the increase, and people need to be monitored more closely when there's a change and all of those things. And there's a lot of deficits in psychiatric care in this country that goes back 30, 40 years. So again, I'm not telling anybody to not take their medications, and I'm not establishing a doctor-patient relationship.
Yeah. Thank you for those important clarifications.
It kind of include those disclaimers.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to make sure that a clip doesn't go out, and
anything can be clipped. So circling back to Keith, there was two things I wanted to mention. Back to touching on what Autumn mentioned about how Keith pointed out how people say we can't negotiate with Putin, but we negotiated with Mao. I don't know if it's a case of just desperation or just imperial hubris, but it seems like it's a combination of not having a peer competitor on the geopolitical world stage for a while now, that the elites in this country have not needed to be smart about how they approach rival nuclear powers. So as opposed to Nixon and Kissinger, who say whatever you want about them, they were at least intelligent enough to talk to the Soviet Union and the Red Chinese separately and not push them together. That's the opposite of what's going on today, whereas we're waging a proxy war against Russia through Ukraine while ginning one up against China through Taiwan. And that's pushing those two countries closer together. And also, because of how much we're lashing out, that's pushing more and more countries into the arms of the Russians and the Chinese. I mean,
Yeah.
the Saudis and the Iranians just started normalizing relations, and there's talk of going off of the petrodollar. So it's like the people who are telling you that you can't negotiate with Putin are either, I don't know if it's dumb or arrogant or just desperate, but basically they're just seem to be just lashing out in a desperate bid to preserve the unipolar moment as much as possible. And then one final piece I want to say about Keith specifically. Autumn, you mentioned that you had not really seen him before. I have seen him before, and it's not something that can be hidden from, and it's something that I think people should compliment him on. He's lost a lot of weight. He looks good.
Oh.
He looks real good.
Well, I had no idea because I never seen him in person before.
Yeah, and he mentioned when I commented on that, he mentioned about how he's been eating a lot of terrible healthy stuff in order to get that. So definitely give him encouragement to keep going because it's paying off.
not knowing what he looked like before, he looks great now.
Yeah. I figured I would comment on that since I did know that part.
Well, this is an even better compliment. I think he looks fabulous, and that's not comparatively speaking.
All right, well, there you go.
And your opinion matters a lot more than mine.
Probably.
Yeah, no, so there you go, Keith.
He's lovely and friendly, and he joined us for drinks afterwards too. And what a great guy! I look forward to seeing him again.
Yeah,
so, that was fun, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, I'll just make 2 quick comments and then we'll move on. So we have quite a few more speakers to talk about, but
but you know what? Some of those guys, the mystery might be better. So I don't think we should feel bad if we skip a couple.
Well, I want to at least touch on some of them. But yeah, that's right. I mean, for some of the ones that are speaking later. But Keith is actually one of them. Yeah. But so hopefully we didn't give too much away. But I will say, without going into the full amount of detail that he did, first that, just the overview that he did from pre-World War I through today, and illustrating systematically how, even while things seem to be going on in the background from the United States perspective, like how all the actions that the government took just to accelerate things and make it worse and throw us into wars that we didn't need to be involved in, or create wars elsewhere that didn't need to happen. It just, when you see it all together like that, it just illustrates a clear pattern that's hard to deny. And if you want to hear what I'm talking about, then you'll have to go see him speak yourself at one of the future events, or go back and watch the video, because I don't want to ruin it for you. The only other thing I'll say is,
better go see him in person.
Yeah, yeah, and you can compliment him on how good he looks.
Exactly.
But the only other thing I'll say is, going back to Kissinger, even Kissinger thinks our foreign policy today is crazy. And I'll leave it at that. Yep. Yeah. No brinksmanship with Russia, please. That's the short version. So with that, let's go to Mike Maharrey. So Autumn, you've been doing a good job leading us off. So go for it.
Well, I mean, Mike Maharrey led with one of his favorite topics, Spooner, Lysander Spooner, right? Is invoked often when you talk about anybody who's working with the 10th Amendment Center, because for anyone who's not already aware, it's their focus is all around nullification. And so he talked about, he quoted, I don't know, I'm not texting, I'm checking my notes. He quoted,
The lady doth protest too much.
Actually, and when I'm looking at my notes, I made a big boo-boo just a little bit ago. It was actually Mike Maharrey who talked about Rosa Parks saying you may do that. I think that
Oh no.
Oh dear.
the subject, but so Dale Woolridge was covering all of the mechanics of the civil rights movement, right? So Mike Maharrey, if you are listening, thank you.
Well, it just goes to show you how it all played together so well. So, yeah, that's just the genius of the Take Human Action tours.
Well, I'm glad I looked at my notes so I could fix that error. Anyway,
Nice spin, Calvin.
No, it's all good. I mean, I don't think that anybody would,
Yeah, you
it's
hear
all
that, Mike?
good.
I know you've been working hard on these, so your work has not been going to waste.
yeah.
And I don't mean Mike Maharrey, although you too. I meant Mike Heiss.
Let's get back to the summary.
What was I saying? I'm so flustered now.
It's all good.
So he talked about Spooner, how he spoke out against the Fugitive Slave Act. He talked about the concept that a law that is unconstitutional ought to be disobeyed. That it's the responsibility of every American to behave in a manner that is consistent with the Constitution, up to and including defiance of unconstitutional laws. And that maybe that's why he told us the Rosa Parks, but be nice about it. So let's see. And I know he quoted James Madison in some of his stuff. Because James Madison even advised that Americans should refuse to cooperate with unconstitutional demands of the federal government. And for anyone who doesn't know, if you're just getting familiar with the Libertarian Party, one of the things that we
Sorry,
That wasn't me.
we generally advise that you try to get involved in your local government so that you can influence the local government to, at the very least, take the position of refusing to enforce unconstitutional laws, right? And that's something that the 10th Amendment Center stands for and seeks to educate people about. And let's see, anybody remember the name of their podcast? It's on my list.
Whose podcast? Mike's?
10th Amendment Center, yeah.
I don't recall the name of the 10th Amendment Center's podcast.
Path to Liberty. The Path to Liberty. Yeah. So I do recommend you check that out.
Well, there you go. So
There was
and
one.
no, go ahead.
I should mention that, especially for these early speakers, I was unable to really catch them because I was manning the door and checking people in. So I was not able to catch all the speakers in detail, but I was able to catch bits and pieces. And one thing that stuck out to me was Mike Maharrey talked about how, when you mentioned Spooner, he also talked about how whenever he is online, he has a lot of, a certain type of people will come at him with with Spooner's arguably most famous quote saying, whether the Constitution be one thing or another, it's either authorize the government we've had or been unable to stop it. Either way, it's unfit to exist. I'm paraphrasing, but basically it's as a way to argue against the 10th Amendment Center's motto of, stick to the Constitution, whatever. And as someone who has, who finds merit in Spooner's logic and also in the Rothbardian story about how, the Constitution was brought about by a centralizing counter-revolutionary coup, I will say that utilizing the 10th Amendment is certainly a step in the right direction. And anybody who is who's complaining that, this is not the right way to do it, we have to get rid of the Constitution. Okay, do it. Go for it. You can't do it. Okay, then let's just stick with this as the first step to trying to dismantle this centralized empire that we're all living under. Right. So it's like, yeah, keep Spooner in mind, but don't use him against people who are doing work to actually, deconstruct centralized power. Even if you think it's not going to, if it needs to go, even if you think it needs to go further, it's a step in the right direction. So don't tear that down.
Yeah, it's nice to have theory, but at a certain point, you have to leave it behind and face reality.
What was what's the phrase? Stop living in Ancapistan in your head.
Yes, that's definitely something that's said in the circles we're in.
Yes, I think Heiss invokes Jordan Peterson a lot when he calls it ideological possession, which is basically where I'm going to butcher this because I'm not nearly as read up on Peterson as he is, but basically it's where you get so as basically possessed by your ideology that it, not only informs your view of the world, but it shapes it and distorts it and makes it so that you kind of funnel everything through it to the point where it, it's twisting how you see the world. And he says, like, ever since he figured out what it means, he sees it in everyone, including a lot of libertarians. Mm-hmm. And it's like most of the very online types who would be the ones who would go at people like Maharrey and Michael Bolden of the 10th Amendment Center with that. It's like, what are you doing? What are you actually doing? You're not operating in the real world per se if all you've got is quoting Spooner at people who are trying to take a first step. Like, do something better. Do better.
Right. Unfortunately, the leaders of our country, for the most part, live in that space, and the leaders of public health live in that space, and therein lies our situation.
The ideological possession space where they think they can just do anything.
Right. Hey, can we briefly go back to Keith Knight for a minute? I just wanted to say a couple of things.
Sure.
First of all, he's so incredibly brilliant and so knowledgeable. But if anybody has any interest in some in-depth conversations with him, in preparation for Liberty Speaks 2, Jorge did an online interview with him entitled Debunking the Great Winston Churchill Myth. And they had this great conversation. It's on Liberty Speaks YouTube. It's incredibly interesting, and he's incredibly knowledgeable. And if anybody is looking for more Keith Knight stuff, it's on there.
Yeah, you'll have to put it in the comments or send it to me later so I can add it in.
And also think about buying the Voluntarist Handbook, also by Keith Knight. Certainly a worthwhile.
Just send me whatever you got related to the guests, and I can throw it in or not the guests, but the speakers, and I can throw it in the episode descriptions later on.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Yeah. For now, though, anything else on Mike
Maharrey?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You want to move on? Gene Epstein was our lunch speaker.
Yeah. So, all right. With that said, then why don't you talk to us about Gene?
Sure. And I know we got to play.
Do you enjoy your lunches, by the way?
Oh, I brought my own.
That's fine. That's what
I had to go across the street because I was not able to eat the lunches that were provided.
Right.
I went with Calvin because I forgot to buy lunch. So.
Okay, so I guess I'm the only one here who bought one of the catered lunches. Okay,
hopefully you enjoyed yours.
It was pretty good. I liked it.
Good.
It was
good.
Very good, fancy sounding sandwiches. The Soprano
they were very fancy sounding. I would have tried one if I could have.
I think it was great. They looked great, and I think it was very well done and very well presented.
Yep.
Yeah.
We had to go with sandwiches just because the venue space itself, like we didn't have tables, so we couldn't do anything elaborate. We just had to have boxes with sandwiches that people could eat easily, and bags of chips and little desserts.
It was super cute.
Well, I found it pretty filling, so I enjoyed it. But anyways,
Well,
Gene.
back to Gene though. You don't have to worry about spoiling it because he's not speaking anywhere else.
Any of the others? And also, well, I'll make one more point about it. I saw that at the other events, everybody's doing a little something different. Some have buffets and everything. So check out your local event.
Yeah, Keith is going to several of them, so good for him for traveling around.
Yeah, appreciate that. So Gene, talked about economics for the most part. He made a quippy little joke about listing a whole bunch of people, including Bernie Sanders, who have ruined economics in America. And he talked about the cigarettes used as currency in the POW camps.
Yeah, I've heard
for
of that.
World War II.
Yeah. Thanks. And which actually I think gave me a really great idea, because we do have people. Any of us who even bother try to explain inflation have people in our lives that it's really difficult to explain to. And I realized, let's stop talking about money and let's talk about cigarettes. Let's pretend we use cigarettes. 1 cigarette equals 1 unit of whatever. Well, what if I wrote on a piece of paper, cigarette? Is that gonna feel like the same to you as a cigarette? Well, that's what happens when you print money out of thin air. That's just me.
Well, it's kind of funny now because if you have a Lucy, it's like a huge deal. You get arrested for it.
You might get strangled. We were in New York City. You might
Exactly,
get strangled
yeah.
for it.
So it's like now something that was used as currency in an informal setting. If you tried to do it today, you would be arrested.
You'd be strangled to death. Let's not mince words here.
Can we get our meme creators to create a meme or a picture of what printing money out of thin air, like take air particles and thin air?
One of our candidates already did that. He did an ad, basically
cranking
the money printing.
The crying
so that's already been done.
Yeah.
We're going to have him on at some point too, because he's running for office this year and possibly next year as well. So just stay tuned for that.
Well, and that's kind of the thing. I think if we use the modern concept of cash money as the example in the illustration, that's where we lose people. And it's because of something else that Gene Epstein said that I assert this. He referenced Hugo Harari, who asserted that money is a fiction that has no objective value. Right? And a lot of people think that. As a matter of fact, one of the NPR episodes that made a really big impression on me, sometime probably around 2019, in like the last 18 months that I was listening to it, they had this whole show about this, that like the only reason why money even works, why paper money even works in society, is because we have all agreed to rely upon it. And I was not economically educated at the time that I am now. So I'm really glad that it made enough of an impression that I could even recall it. But so really, because most people have come to conceptualize cash money in modern society as just a piece of paper that doesn't mean anything, that we all just consent to agree symbolizes X. They're already in the point where saying printing money doesn't mean anything to them. It doesn't make the impact. Like, we have to make the point with something else.
Yeah, I usually will remind people of the instructions on the Monopoly game. Do you guys remember?
I think I know what you're referencing, but I think I know what you're referencing, how the bank doesn't run out of money, and if it does, you just write things on regular pieces of paper.
Yeah, it's a great...
Yeah.
Because if you remember, at least for me, and when I played Monopoly with my parents and with my kids, whenever that would happen, we'd all be like, that can't be right. And literally that scene should be, and the Fed, like, so that's my favorite reference, where I tell people, remember when you're playing Monopoly and they said, well, if you run out of money, you could just print more. Didn't that feel wrong? That's what we do now. Do you understand now? Okay. So.
Yeah.
And you'll get some people with that, but I think too many people are already lost to the idea that
Yeah.
that's how it works and it's okay.
How many people have even played Monopoly, especially among the younger generation?
Ooh, well, I would hope lots because there's so many different variations of it. You could have like a space version, you could have a Philadelphia version.
That's true. Well,
Do you know?
yeah.
but circling back to
Wait.
All right.
One more digression, because I'm
One-
queen of
one more.
digressions. When my kids were younger, I found this Monopoly game that you make all the stuff based on your family, and I named it after my son, Bobbyopoly, and you made all the things about my life and the kids' life, and you printed it all out, and the stickers and everything, and they learned about me and the family and everything by playing Monopoly, and even the
That's fun.
cards. We made all these things. It was just the greatest.
Okay, we have to make libertarian.
MC-opoly. I'm seeing it now.
Libertarianopoly. Right, but we can change the whole thing and change that rule. The bank can't print money.
Luke, that's your task from now on. You
Can we do
don't come
that?
back until you have MC-opoly.
The Mises Institute website has a whole article, at least one, of all the problems with Monopoly as it relates.
That's
to
why you need to
how it
improve
actually-
upon it.
as it relates to how it teaches economics. But anyways, we're going
All
all over the place.
We're down
Autumn,
the hole.
Autumn, was there anything more from Gene Epstein that you wanted to
Dean
go over?
didn't say anything else interesting at all. Next was Maj.
He's no.
Oh, God.
I'm
Okay.
sure.
Gene, I'm so sorry.
I'm sure.
No, he's amazing, and then he has that Soho forum.
Soho Forum. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely go to
Monthly
his Soho forum.
Debate series, which
it's great.
it's always during a weekday, so I unfortunately can't really take off.
Yeah, well, I'll just say this. I've gone to 2 in person, and it's very much worth it. So if you can make the trip, do. And
I think I've only been to 1 in person, and this was
probably
this
the
was
same
the-
one I went to.
well, yes, I'm sure it was. It was back in, what was it, 2019, 2020? I believe it
Star
was.
Work versus Dave.
Yes.
Dave Smith. Yeah.
Yep.
And then you had the after party with the panel with like Maj
Yep.
and Dave and Gene and Mike and
Yeah.
well, Nick Gillespie maybe.
I don't know if Gillespie was actually in the. I think Matt Welch. That's
Or
who-
Matt Welch. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, and it was at Gene's apartment. It was very nice to open his apartment to us, and then as we were leaving, we were supposed to keep it down, and we didn't. But at any rate, Gene's great. He's very very knowledgeable, very smart, very witty. And was there anything else we wanted to talk about with regards to him?
Just
No, I
me
think we were-
personally, he's on the list of people I need to learn more about. I didn't really know that much about him, and so he's on my list.
I remember I remember a Tom Woods episode that where he was like reprinting a debate that he and Gene did with a couple other people who defended the Fed versus ending it, and Tom talked about how he didn't really know too much about Gene, and so he was like, okay, I think I'm gonna have to do carrying this guy, and then you play it and you have Gene's opening statement, and it is so fiery that Tom says he was blown away. It was like, oh wow, this guy is
Yeah.
the real deal.
And one last thing about Gene, he's very personable. I went up to him at the first Soho forum
Oh, yeah.
I went to. He had no idea who I was or anything. I just introduced myself and said I said if he was one of my favorite Tom Woods guests, which is still true. And he just seemed so flattered by it. We had like a very lively conversation. So definitely go talk to him if you get a chance.
Yep.
So Maj was
So
next.
Maj, how many of the future events is Maj speaking at? Do you know, Calvin?
How many of the future events? One or
gonna be
two. I can check.
Yeah, because I think I can hit the high points without giving away any of his stories.
Yeah, I think it's definitely okay. So he's going to Chicago. He is going to Austin, and he's going to Denver. So he's going to 4. He's a trooper.
Yeah,
He's really gung ho. He's been
Yeah, he's
a
doing
lot
the
of
work.
stuff. I think it was, I forget if it was Austin or Chicago, where basically at that
Chicago.
same weekend he's like double booked for a state convention in another state, and he's actually he's making arrangements to catch a flight to go back and do it, to do both of them in a weekend. So
he even told me that he turned down CPAC because he had already booked for the LPPA convention.
Aw.
No, he's really been a trooper. He's really gone all in on helping us out. So
I can't say enough good things about that. So I'm gonna step away for a minute to grab another drink. But Autumn, definitely go ahead with just your whatever. However much you feel like saying, is I think it's going to be different at all.
I got a glass of my boxed wine. I got this. Go get your water.
All right, you got it.
So does anybody else know how has Maj ever told the story about his first interaction with the police? It was the first time I'd heard it.
Yeah, it was a very interesting story. I don't know. I don't think we should tell it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Right. I'm teasing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's profound and enlightening, and it could have taken him on many different paths in his life's journey.
Yeah.
Is what was not lost on me, but I should stop talking now.
Maj is also a very interactive speaker. He interacts with the audience a lot. He solicits feedback. He solicits participation. So he's very compelling.
Yeah. But he's just so engaged, and just to mention, we're going to do a lecture series at his center.
Yeah, the Solutionary Center.
And I got to talk to him about that just a few seconds. Yeah.
Go ahead and expand on that, because we don't want to give away Maj's speech, because it's probably going to be, he's going to evolve it. He talks very freely, but I think some of the stories will recur. So what is it that you guys are going to do at the Solutionary Center? Tell us a little more about that.
It's a whole lecture series at the Solutionary Center on libertarian principles, starting with an introductory lecture and then expanding, various concepts in more detail. Of course, I have my area of expertise and the things that I like to talk about, but it's a group of us, and Maj is gonna have it at the Solutionary Center, and we're working on this project, and I can't even begin to explain the degree by which I'm committed and excited and about this project, and we're going to work towards having it on video and having it all documented. And it also expands to the concept where I spoke to a middle school principal locally to have me and some others come into the schools and do civics liberty elective, like one Wednesday a month after school, to kind of offset the wokeism in our schools. And so I really would encourage everybody in their states. We did a Liberty Story Hour in Delaware, and I'm working on one or two in Kent County to go into the libraries for the younger age groups to interact with your principals at your middle schools. And especially if your kids go there and they know your kids, maybe not a lot of libertarians have their kids in government indoctrination camps, but needless to say, if you're part of the community and they know you, because this middle school principal knew both of my kids, he was a high school principal at the time, and he's open to having this elective for the kids. And so I just encourage everybody in their states to start doing this, because we really have to counteract the wokeism in the schools.
But by the way, Irene.
Yeah, hi.
What is the Solutionary Center?
Calvin's going to do that one.
Well, go ahead, Calvin.
Well, I'll say it briefly. So that is his community center in Philadelphia. They run gun safety classes out of there, also conflict resolution, and any other class that anyone wants to teach for free for the community can be taught there. Maj even said he took the sewing class that they did there. So it could be a whole bunch of different topics. Definitely go back and listen to episode 42 where we talk about the class in more detail with Irene and also Regina Badger and Rob Coburn, who are going to be helping us with the class as well. Last thing real quick, the episodes of Torin that I mentioned earlier, episode 27 in episode 32. So definitely go back and check those out.
Funny story I wanted to mention about the Solutionary Center. It was in his speech to the LPPA. Maj talked about how one of the earliest things that he did with the Solutionary Center was, because obviously anybody who's even remotely familiar with Maj knows he is a big gun rights guy for urban communities, and he talked about how their first Solutionary Center, I don't know if it's the current. I think it might be the current location, but basically they set it up like right across from the city office where
it's not the current location, by the way.
Oh, okay, so it's not the current location.
That was at least 2 locations ago.
Okay, but you know what I'm getting at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he talked about how when he first started it up, he wanted to help urban Americans get gun permits easier so they could be armed and effectively defend themselves. So what he did was the Solutionary Center, he would walk them through how to do it, and he had set it up so that the location was like right across the street from where the city permitting office was, so that people could take the knowledge that they got from the center and then just go right across the street to get the permitting process going. The city closed and relocated the permitting center.
No, they didn't do that, but they did change their hours so that they couldn't go when most people were available.
I thought they relocated entirely.
Well, they probably did both, but either way, you can't do that anymore.
No, I just thought it was very funny to point out to people that, hey, this guy was so effective at getting people armed that the government actually went out of its way to avoid him.
Yeah, and we talk about it a bit with him in episode 40 when we had Maj on, so go back and listen to that one as well.
In case you thought we were exaggerating when we said that the government doesn't want you to exercise your rights.
I don't know if anybody listening to this really thinks that's an exaggeration, but if anyone is out there, we're not. At any rate, I figure we talk that up since we don't want to give too much of the content of Maj's speech. But needless to say, it was very engaging. It was very illuminating, and I think it was well received. Maj's speeches are usually pretty well received.
Yeah.
Reno, he gave what I think was widely considered the best speech at our little batch celebration, and it was the best one because it was such an important message, which is that we're up against something very very scary and very powerful, and some people are just not going to make the cut. Some people are going to fold, and it's up to us to prove him wrong. So
yeah, he spoke at Liberty Speaks 2 years ago, and I really didn't know much about him in detail, to be honest with you. And I learned so much from his speech, and we had non-libertarians at the event, and I had multiple people who were there who subsequently became more engaged in the liberty movement just by their own activities for certain things that Maj said in this particular speech that he gave. And I learned to make sure that I come to where people are. I didn't really fully understand, to be honest, that all gun laws are inherently racist. I didn't know really, to be honest with you, at the time, a couple of years ago, how successful his plans and what he's implemented are. And I was able to just fully understand someone like him. And so I just really appreciate my journey with Maj and coming full circle to teaching at the center. So I'm just incredibly grateful for his contributions and to his contribution in my own liberty journey, to be perfectly honest with you.
Oh yeah, and I have a lot of campaign stories too, like when on the campaign trail in 2019, like Mike and I worked alongside him for that, and I've told some of them already. I'll tell more in the future.
And everyone was supportive. The whole party was on board.
Oh yeah, that's the funny part of it. I think he even referenced that during his speech at the Take Human Action Tour event. He said like, "Oh, the party was not supportive," and he was 100% right. They, largely were not. The apparatus, the leadership
specifically
was not supportive. But yeah, but coming back to how much work he's been putting in real quick, I think I saw him speak 3 times in the last month now, which usually does not happen. He spoke at the PA convention, he spoke at the New Jersey convention, and he spoke here. So that's definitely saying something. Like he's not
like I said, he's gone really gung ho in supporting us ever since Reno.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I was with all 3 events with you this last month.
I think you might have missed his talk at the PA convention, though.
I missed the talk. Yeah, It's been remarkable.
You have been putting in a lot of work too, Irene.
No, yeah, compared to Maj, but he's coming to Delaware. Him and Spike are coming to Delaware Convention May 20th, and Mike Toure is also speaking. And wait till you guys see the T-shirt for Delaware Convention. I just want to let you know that you will want it. It's
I'll
great.
just have to see the pictures. I don't think I'll be able to make any more trips the rest of the year, but you'll definitely have to show me later.
I think I'm pretty sure, 99% sure, we're doing a gun class with him before our convention. So the details just went up. Actually, the convention details are up. I'll give you that stuff for the Delaware convention.
Yeah, send me that afterwards too. But do we have anything else on Maj?
No, let Maj speak for himself.
Yes, exactly.
Let everybody go see him at the 3 locations where he's speaking in the future.
I mean, we could do a whole episode on Maj if you want.
Yeah.
We could do a whole episode on all the we could do whole episodes on all the tangents we've gone down with all.
Save that for the end, because I do have something specific to say about that at the end. But let's go to the next speaker for now, which is Tom Woods. And before you ask, he is speaking at least one of the other events. He is speaking in Denver, so just bear that in mind. But go ahead.
Yeah, so Denver, Colorado, you're going to be in for a great treat. Tom Woods is amazing. Anyone who hasn't seen him speak. I did not know who Tom Woods was until the first time I saw him speak live at the Pennsylvania Convention in 2022. So my first exposure to him was a live experience, and I'm a loyal listener to his podcast now, and he taught me how to monetize my haters. I mean, it's somewhere between him and Eric July, and that's coming handy for me in my campaign for House Rep last year. But, I mean, I'm terrible at asking for money, so I mounted a great plan, but I didn't really raise a lot of money. So maybe next time.
That was just very surprising for me to hear, because I think I started listening to him and Jason Stapleton around like 2015, and then other than Liberty on the Rocks, like that was pretty much just me on my island, going on runs around the city listening to those two. And that was about it. That was my exposure to libertarianism at that point. So it's kind of interesting to hear that people are just hearing about him now. Not to say that's surprising, because there's so many more people that have come in. It's just funny in comparison looking back now.
Calvin, you remember how I said I was listening to NPR in 2019?
I forget sometimes that I had a bit of a head start.
Which is not state media.
No.
Sure.
Listen, because Tom Woods taught me, I want to make sure to support his efforts, because one of the things that he was promoting there was go to the website, yourfriendsareWrongAboutUkraine.com.
WrongaboutUkraine.com.
His website. I love that he
has the greatest websites.
Both. Yeah, Wrong About Ukraine and yourfriendsareWrongAboutUkraine.com.
Yeah.
I think he said both the sites. And then that's where you can get the ebook. Your Facebook friends are wrong about
Ukraine.
And Twitter followers and whoever else.
Well, it started out as your Facebook friends are wrong.
Oh yeah, I know. It's not just limited to Facebook.
I gotta say, one thing that was very interesting about the whole talk is we're it was on Broadway, right? That the blockchain center.
It was on the street Broadway. Yes.
Yeah. So we're in the Upper West Side of Manhattan on Broadway, and we've got the doors open, and every so often people are coming in and asking,
I was going to mention
around.
that.
Yeah, so a couple people took a flyer and hung out. The only guy who stayed was one guy who I mentioned there was free beer. So
Oh, I didn't even realize anyone stayed.
And where'd Irene go?
She'll come back, I assume. Just keep going.
Okay. Well, anyways, so basically, because part of the purpose of these events is like to mix it up in the culture. So we kind of talked about how maybe we should have a speaker outside to project the speeches out, and then we were talking like that might irritate some locals, and also it might be a permitting issue. When Maj was speaking, I was kind of thinking, this is good content, and I think it would play well in this audience. And when Tom spoke, it's like, this is good content. It would not play well in this environment.
Well, the thing is,
they railing so hard at all of the establishment, all the regime establishment narratives and figures.
I was actually thinking Dave and Maj. They actually spent a decent amount of time, hanging out outside to get some air, and while they were doing that, they were just talking with like random people who were walking by, and Robbie Bernstein, who didn't speak, was there also, and he was making some inroads with some people who were on the street as well. So props to the three of them. They were,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they were definitely like trying their best. Like, I mean, it's a little tough because we're talking about New York people very much on the left on the whole. But
I think I told you both this the story of because I was doing check-in and I was manning the door. I think I told you both one of my favorite stories, because obviously I'm sure most people watching this are aware that this occurred pretty soon after the Nashville shooting, and so we had one older gentleman come in and wondering what's going on, and I started explaining to him. It's like, okay, so you guys are for the guns, and as soon as he phrased it that way, I was like, oh boy,
I remember that.
But I was like, okay, yeah, pretty much. And he said, well, I'm for the children, and I was like, well, they're not mutually exclusive if you want to have that discussion. And then he just left.
He's gone.
Well, I think I actually talked with him for a little while longer after that, and it's all about the way you phrase it. Like, if there's one of two ways to go about it, which I try to do: either attack the left from the left, or attack the right from the right if you're in debate mode, or you can explain the ways in which your position will accomplish the goal better that they're trying to accomplish. Like, if we're talking about school safety, then having somebody there who is armed and can protect the students is going to do a lot more than just putting up a gun-free zone sign.
Right.
We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details tonight, but that's kind of the argument I was making, not coming at it from like a our rights trump everything standpoint, because that's not going to win anyone over. But like, try to see that you're trying to get the same outcome. That's what you need to emphasize.
Yeah, I didn't really go into details. I just was trying to take care of it quickly. So it was like, okay.
Right.
But
so,
at any rate,
real quick, Irene ran into thunderstorms. Oh, maybe she is coming back. I thought she wasn't, but yeah. So it's up in the air whether she will be back or not. Just wanted to point that out. So anything else on Tom?
Let's see. He actually he started talking about I'm super paraphrasing when I put it this way, politics being a popularity contest. And it like, he definitely got me thinking, and I have kept coming back to this in my mind in my quiet times as a rabid consumer of podcasts. I don't have a lot of quiet times, but when I have, I'm thinking about what Tom said, and I'm thinking about, like, what can we do to make ourselves the popular kids as a party, as advancements with getting people on board? Like what can we do to make us the popular kids that people want to be a part of? Because especially there's a big anti-establishmentarian mentality taking hold, right? So why not embrace it? And I think that's actually, now that I'm saying it out loud, it's one of the things that we definitely struggle with, right? As a party, we all have our own different ideas about how to go against the green. Irene, you have some storm going out there, don't you? I can hear it in the background.
Yeah, there was tornado and thunderstorm warnings tonight, and
It's better. We're better now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think she might be gone again. We'll see.
Oh, that's why it's better.
Yeah. We'll come back to her. So,
Irene, let us know you're okay. Text me.
okay. I take it we can move to our last speaker. Then,
Dave Smith.
The last speaker, and then the campaign training is what we have left.
So
the last one was Dave Smith. He will not be speaking in any of the other events, but his topic was a little more personal than the rest, which I particularly appreciated. It really struck a note with me. But I'll come back to that. So, Autumn, what do you want to say about it?
Well, I mean, we were standing next to each other for this one. So, I even looked at you and I was so making me cry. I pointed to my ears, my eyes welling up with tears. My ears. Anyway. And so Dave talked about something that he's at least from what I've observed, he's only casually mentioned in public before, about his second born, his son being diagnosed with a heart defect while his wife was still pregnant, and having had open heart surgery at just 3 days old. And as a parent, now I'm the only parent left on the cast at the moment, aren't I? I knew exactly what he was talking about. Like, I can tell you, here's one thing that happens when you have kids. You're never afraid of the dark ever again. At least not when your kid's with you. And it's 100% true. So whatever I'm afraid of, you're afraid to go into the dark basement. Are you ever afraid to get the laundry out of the dryer in the basement in the middle of the night? Like, I'll just get it in the morning. Nobody ever chicken out. Somebody who's listening knows what I'm talking about. If you don't have kids yet, once you have children, those stupid little things, you feel like you find this strength inside of you that just bubbles to the surface, and you say, I gotta hold my crap together. I gotta get this done. I know that my fear is irrational, and therefore I must behave as a rational thing is to be not afraid. And so that's my version. That's my way of articulating the story that the point that Dave was making to us. And he was explaining about how because this is his second child, he had a toddler daughter at the time who they needed to not let her think that the world was coming to an end, that something terrible was happening. You don't want to overly traumatize your children, and you need to basically suck it up. Yeah. And march on. And he needed to be strong for his wife too, who was going to be even more affected by the stress of the situation. And and when it actually struck me so deeply when he made the transition and drew the parallel to how we have got to keep marching forward, because the Libertarian Party is the party of principle. We're not just a set of random social ideologies. We are representing principles that make it really easy to make a decision about what's the right thing to do in even scenarios that we haven't even imagined yet. And we're fighting against people who are completely captured by financial interests. and manipulating our government and taking money from the people and in their own self-interests at best, right? And we have got to just suck it up and keep marching onward and keep doing the work and keep showing up every day and keep advancing in whatever way that we can. The same way that he and his wife, while they were scared to death and uncertain about the outcome that they were facing, kept showing up every for their daughter. And even though inside they were freaking out, they put the work in and they stole themselves to make it at least productive, to make the days move forward, to make her life feel like it wasn't about to end. No matter how much they were no matter how much we were despairing about the little losses that we're inevitably going to face every day.
Yeah, and one thing that he didn't mention this time that he has mentioned in the past was what happened while all this was going on, because he had been, staying with his wife in a hospital in New York City for days on end, and this was in the middle of the COVID crisis, and they were just both completely exhausted, and they'd forgotten that vaccine passports were still a thing. So they just went out, left the hospital, took a break, took a breather to go in a diner and get some food. And they just sat down, didn't even think about it. And when they got to the table, the guy said he needed to check their cards. And it was only then that it had occurred to him that, like, this is still New York City in the middle of the crisis. And, he basically begged and pleaded, like, we haven't had anything to eat for days. Can we just get some food? And they wouldn't let him. So he had to leave in the middle of all of that. Like, he couldn't even get food.
Yeah.
It's just,
that's well, he could have if he just did what he was told.
Right.
So that's the part that's really painful about all this. So, and Irene is finally back, it seems.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I think consequences of these storms. I'm sorry. I heard the Dave Smith part.
Yes, we were talking about Dave Smith. We were talking about his personal experience around the birth of his of his son, I believe it was, his second child.
Yeah, his son.
Yeah.
So many
it, shaped what lessons you draw from it.
Yeah, there's so many wrongs.
Yeah, just the need to keep yourself together in the face of overwhelming struggles,
adversity,
and both in terms of for your family and the people around you, but also for the cause itself. And it's not easy. It's something that we all struggle with every day, but it is something that we have to do to the best of our abilities.
Yeah, I think his personal story is so profound and moving, and every time I hear him speak, I learn something just so amazing about his journey. And he spoke at the Fifth Brewing Company a couple of months ago. He had a comedy show, and we went up there, and he told us about his journey to God.
That played into it as well.
Yeah, it's very moving.
I think the short version of that is I'm underselling it, but I don't know what episode his podcast it was on, so I can't reference back to it. But I don't think he had never made a prayer to God in his life. He was atheist or agnostic. He just didn't think about religion at all, more or less. And around the time his wife was giving birth, there were questions about, if his child would make it, if his wife would make it, and they took her back. And he had never talked to God before, and he basically sat in the hospital waiting room, and he was like, God, I know I've never talked to you before, but please, if you can, save my wife and child, then, I will know that you're there looking out for me, and that, you have a presence in this world. And they, it took a lot of effort, as we've outlined, and it was a tough, no question of that, but, they did make it, and he has he has his wife and 2 children now. He has his family, and he's been a Christian since then.
Yeah, I really appreciate the way he shares his personal stories, and they affect me, and I learn a lot of things from him, and I wasn't particularly expecting to hear him tell his story and journey to God when I went to see him at his comedy show in the Brewing Company. And, I've had some Christian journeys the last few years myself, and he's just a very valuable part of the liberty movement in particular.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a very different show than the Pottstown one.
It was many funny stories about seeing. It was a comedy show, but for whatever reason that day, he chose to tell a mini version, and it just made me personally understand him better. So he's such a profoundly important part of our liberty movement and the greater liberty space.
Yeah, for sure. So, any other comments on Dave? All right. Well, let's leave some time at the end for Larry Sharpe's campaign training the next day on Sunday.
Anything we want to say about the after party? I had a good time.
Oh, I guess, yeah, we could touch on that briefly. So yeah, Keith Knight was there, and I also had
Gene Epstein and his wife stopped by briefly.
Okay, I missed him.
Right.
He really wasn't around very long at all, but
Okay.
he came by, said hi, and then they had to. I think Hisako, his wife, said that they had to get going because it was a ways away.
Yeah.
He did make an appearance.
I also talked with Dan Sanchez from FEE.
Yep, Dan
Foundation
Sanchez was there. He helped run the table.
Economic education, and he's a very cool guy, very interesting guy. I'm looking forward to talking with him more later on. I was glad I got a chance to interact with him. Mark Tanzer from Taggart Trading in South Florida Gold, I believe it is. He's an old friend of mine, but definitely check him out. He deserves a free plug.
Those silver nuggets were definitely drawing attention. But when we were there, lots of drinking, lots of laughing, lots of little stories and teasing, and some food as well. So it was a good time.
Keith Knight is forever the defender of my cauliflower buffalo bites.
Yeah. I don't know. Somehow those ended up on a plate outside. I don't know how. Did you do that?
It's really just a story. It's just
a story for another time.
It's not for now.
I think that is worth mentioning, though, that Theo Talcott is he the vice chair of the People's Party or something? Like, he stopped after the event. It was great to have him there.
Yeah, we had a couple People's Party guys there who decided they would check us out.
It was great.
Yeah,
he drove down from Vermont, so shout out to Theo for coming down for that. It's great to see some of the coalition relationships paying off like that.
Yeah. Also, I think I don't know if it was the proprietor or the owner. He actually came out and chatted with us at times, and he seemed really open to us, but of course he fell back on what about the roads. So
well, that's just a learning process thing.
Yeah, no, but we had a good time.
Yeah,
had a good time.
All right.
Roads matter.
We could do a whole episode on what we learned from Larry Sharpe if you wanted to, honestly.
Yeah, that might merit its own episode.
We've never gone this far. This long.
But
it's already an hour and a half.
Yeah, just give us we'll just I'll trust. I hope it's okay with you guys. I'm just going to trust Autumn alone to summarize what the key takeaways of what Larry said, and then we'll wind it down. So
yeah. Okay, so I'm going from total memory because I actually have those notes on my iPad, which I didn't even take out for this. So the biggest thing that hit with me, which I have gone to our candidate support group and shared this specific point, and maybe it makes just as much sense to you guys as it does to me after I reiterated it to people. But when you're a candidate, it doesn't matter how much you profit from your fundraising efforts. It just matters that you keep raising funds. So if you spend $5,000, okay, you know, let's actually talk more relatably to the local candidates. If you spend $500 to run a barbecue fundraiser and the fundraiser only raises $600, that's a huge success. It doesn't matter that you only profited $100.
A political campaign is not a business; it is a passion project. That's what he elaborated on.
But that aside, like the point is, so candidates are judged based on how much they raise in funds when you report, because you know these things have to be reported to the state or to the federal government, and you've now raised $1,100. It doesn't, like, you raised the 500 and then you spent the 500 and you raised another 600. That's $1,100 that you raised. But also in those efforts, right, you're making impressions, you're creating opportunities for people who are there because they're interested in you to learn more about you. Because even your friends and family who think that you're great, they're not casually equipped with the talking points to explain to people why libertarian candidates should be considered. But if you nail them down for a 3-hour barbecue where you're paying for all their drinks and maybe doing some raffle fundraisers or something, or not raffle, right? You need a special license for that in most states.
Sweepstakes.
But yeah, you know, you're like maybe you're selling yard signs for a mild what's the word when people make money off of something?
Profit.
Thank you. Profit. It's, hey, look, just one glass of wine. That's not so bad.
Oh man.
But anyway, so you know, you're getting all of your literature out there to promote yourself, so it's all worth it. So do not, Luke, like you said, do not think of it as a business. That's exactly what he said. And but it's not intuitive without some examples of exactly what that means. What's the other? You know, he talked about all the things that you need to run a decent campaign on your team. What's your idea, Luke? You got a thought?
No, I was also going to say another thing that he mentioned was activists and candidates are different things. They play different roles. They are distinct.
Right.
Yep.
That was so I guess I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit. But
oh no, I appreciate it because I was kind of floundering where to go next. Yeah. So what is it? You've got activists who are generally single issue focused, and you can use them on your campaigns. But they're
really passionate. They're really driven.
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to get the word out.
Yeah.
And but they're also not. They're not. And we talked a little bit. There seemed to be quite a little lengthy exchange on culture war stuff. And Larry said, yeah, the thing you need to do as a candidate is not be on the opposite side of the person you're talking to. It's the candidate's job is to show up and communicate, but don't get immersed in the culture war. You can have an opinion, but whatever answer you give, pass the litmus test of not being on the opposite side of whoever you're talking to. Right. And the activists, leave the culture war to the activists.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but the most important point that I think I learned from him is what you have your candidate subsequently work on as it relates to when they get called to question on a culture war issue, to not give the soundbite that puts you in the duopoly box, and that you force them to have a policy issue response to the culture war question without avoiding it. And then we reviewed the culture war good candidate answer to abortion and even transgender surgery for children from a libertarian perspective. And so that was just a really good way and really helped me to process. And, as an advisor to Termat, it's just a very good learning experience. So Larry was my favorite part of the weekend, and I learned so much, and I'm very grateful.
And just for the record, the candidate training that he did was free and open to anyone and everyone to attend.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, as will they.
It was not. It was $300. Stop.
Why would you say that, Irene?
What?
You don't know why I would say that. I'm kidding.
I wasn't going to.
That was a very specific number, though.
Well, Irene posted a photo that we took on Sunday of all of us, to Twitter, and because she does not have as many of the certain elements that are not too fond of us blocked, they swarmed and jumped in and started denouncing it.
Let's not go too far down that road.
By the way, it was an MC event which had nothing to do with the LP, but somehow that's the metric. Comparing it.
I will.
It was. It was quite the. It was quite the. At least frustrating and entertaining the few times I dropped in to take a look at it. But
I do have to point out we are very close to being our longest episode ever. So far, that is Scott Horton, who has the longest episode ever, but we are about to pass that, and I don't.
That is quite the accomplishment.
So we should wrap this up because I do not want to break that record tonight. Well, that needs to stand for a little while. So,
at any rate,
let's just go around and do our plugs. And thank you all for coming. I definitely want to say that. And thank you all for attending the Take Human Action event. So let's start with Irene.
Thanks for having me on. You can find me on Twitter as myself, Irene Mavrakakis. Check us out on libertyspeaks.world. Come to the Delaware Convention May 20th. Check out more information on the website. And also there's an event tomorrow that I'm helping promote with the LaRouche organization on the LaRouche YouTube. And it's entitled, What Would a Competent U.S. President Do Tomorrow? And it's at 9 p.m. tomorrow online. You can check it out on LaRouche YouTube. And two of the speakers are Maj Toure and Jorge Basada. And so we're having LaRouche people, socialists, and libertarians debate and have this discussion. And I'm really excited about it.
And just for context, the LaRouche people that you're talking about, they were part of the Rage Against the War Machine Coalition. Are part of it.
Yeah, and I've gotten to know them really well. I went to an event in Manhattan, and Daniel Burke and Anastasia, and I really like working with them. And they're hosting the event. Liberty Speaks is co-promoting, but it's going to be a series of events leading to more prominent and debates. And it's a great offshoot project of some of the coalition members. And the idea that we're going to have libertarian, socialist, or communist, and LaRouche people debating what would a competent president do tomorrow, a live discussion on economics amongst libertarians, communists, and members of the LaRouche movement tomorrow at 9 p.m.
All right,
it's all over my Twitter.
All right, thank you, Irene. Luke, what do you got?
Well, as far as me personally, I really don't do much on Facebook anymore, except in groups. I have a personal Twitter now, Luke Ensor MC, but I don't do too much with that either, except bug some of the other libertarians a little bit.
Well, Mr. Co-founder of
the main. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me give my actual plug. In the spirit of what we've actually come here to talk about, I'd say takehumanactiontour.com for the upcoming events, and that'll be Chicago, April 15th and 16th, Chicago, Illinois, obviously. Nashville, Tennessee, April 22nd and 23rd. Austin, Texas, April 29th and 30th. Oakland, California, May 13th and 14th, and Denver, Colorado, May 27th and 28th. And go to takehumanaction.tour.com and you can get the Eventbrite links, and from there you can get lodging and everything else.
Yeah. Go to the episode description for the full list of speakers at the remaining tour events. You will not want to miss them. So thank you, Luke, and last Autumn.
Yeah, so thanks everybody. I've got you know what, it's not a Mises Caucus specific, I believe. It's an LPPA event. We have a 420 outreach event scheduled for April 20th, in case that was a little too cryptic. So if you're interested in joining us for a little community outreach, I know it's a Thursday. They might think it's suspicious if you call off work, but I mean, don't partake so you don't get busted on a test after. But we're not going out to smoke pot in public. We're actually just leveraging it as a great, like, hey, happy 420. Have you heard about the good word of libertarianism? I was
going to say, I wonder what the outreach could possibly be about.
Well, I mean, I don't want to give it away because I don't want anybody to.
No, it's supposed to be on set.
But reach out. So Autumn Pangia is a pretty unique name. You're going to be able to find me on Twitter and Facebook if you're looking for me. I've got my blonde curls you'll see in my profile picture. Heaven forbid there's another account. But then also, I am the campaign manager for Ken Krawchuk, who has declared his candidacy for Pennsylvania governor in 2026. So we're getting a really nice early start. If anybody's interested in getting warmed up with a statewide campaign, we're looking for people to help us out. So reach out. And thanks.
Yeah, Luke. I think it is worth pointing out that.
Thanks for what?
I'm trying to remember. Is there even a statewide race in PA in 2024? Because I'm not sure there is.
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. So there won't even be another one until 2026. So, yeah, we'll leave it at that, though.
For the presidential run.
Oh, right. Yeah, not statewide. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a little bit different.
Technically statewide, but yes.
Right. So if we go like 2 minutes longer, we'll beat Horton, and I don't want to do that. So, well, I'll end it here since we've already shouted out the Take Human Action Tour events. I will say our next episode next week will be with a very promising special election candidate, Elijah Shreech. I'm going to say his name wrong. Shreeching. I'll have to ask him before we get on the episode next week. But I'm very excited to have him on the show. And until next time, don't forget to take human action. Bye.
Bye.
TakeHumanActionTour.com.
Take care.